President Biden today said his economic plan is working to bring America out of the pandemic, but we need to invest more in education, in infrastructure to stay competitive. What are the musts that you believe need to be included?
Yes, thank you. Well, this is about rebuilding for the future. I mean, the president is, of course, right. The rescue package is working. It's pulling us out of the pandemic, creating 500,000 jobs a month, which is a fantastic pace. But we need to prepare for the future. We need to invest in childcare so that people can go back to work. We still have 2 million women who have dropped out of the workforce. We have to make sure every American has access to broadband. The president's calling for historic investments in broadband. It's not okay. It's not acceptable that we still have millions of Americans without access to broadband. We need to invest in job training and apprenticeships so people can have the skills they need to get the jobs of today and tomorrow. And we need to invest in manufacturing so that we make critical goods such as semiconductors in America again. So, you know, it's not enough to pull ourselves out of the pandemic. It's time to rebuild our infrastructure, rebuild for the future so Americans can compete and our children have a chance.
And yet the counteroffer from Republicans doesn't seem much higher than the original. Where's the progress that you see, and how long is it worth continuing the negotiation?
Yes, well, I should say, you know, we have to give them credit. I have been involved in these discussions and in these negotiations. They're operating in good faith, and they came back to us with a higher number. It is progress. There's no doubt about it. It's progress. I think if I had said to you a few months ago that Republicans would be coming back to the president with a nearly $1 trillion counteroffer, you might not have believed it. So we're still at the table. We are trying. It isn't enough, as you say. They're not very clear about how they propose to pay for it. And of course, the president has been crystal clear. We're not going to tax or burden middle America or middle class Americans. But, you know, our job is to stay at the table and to find some common ground. And so we will continue to do that.
The president talked about how the administration is working to combat supply issues, combat issues with computer chips, as you mentioned, and America can't innovate without chips. You just held a summit with the companies that supply chips and the companies that need chips, from Google to Amazon to car makers. What's the next step here?
So right now, as we are talking to one another, the piece of legislation which would fund a semiconductor fund at $52 billion is on the Senate floor. In fact, I was talking to senators before I came over here, and there is a sense of optimism that this will get across the finish line perhaps as early as today or tonight to fund a CHIPS fund at $52 billion, which would come to the Department of Commerce. So, of course, it's not over till it's over, and of course, it has to get through the House. But at this point, I think there's broad bipartisan recognition that we can't afford not to do this. I mean, think about your own life. Everything you do relies upon chips. You know, your phone, your appliances, your computer, your car, artificial intelligence, not to mention the national defense applications. So we have to get it done, and I believe we will get it done.
Are you hearing what you want to hear from the industry? Are you getting what you need on that front?
Yes, yes, thank you. So as you mentioned, I convened over 35 CEOs last week, leaders in the semiconductor industry, and they have been very collaborative and really leaning in with us to find a solution to this problem. It's an economic security problem, it's a national security problem, and I have to say thank you to everyone that we have been engaged with. They've been great partners, and this will require public-private partnership. We can't do it. Government can't fix this problem alone, and the private sector needs to be there, and I think they will be.
GM just announced it's restarting production at several plants that had been idled due to the chip shortage. Meantime, you've got COVID cases rising in Taiwan, which is the heart of the semiconductor industry. Could that impact supply, and will the U.S. do anything to help?
Well, you put your finger on a very important problem, which is that we are heavily dependent on a company called TSMC, which is based in Taiwan, for a high percentage of our semiconductors, and which is exactly why we need to make semiconductors in America. You know, it would be our plan to build another 6 or 7 manufacturing operations in America over time, so that we won't be so vulnerable to, you know, relying overly on one company or one country.
So, speaking of countries, obviously improving infrastructure, improving supply chains helps to boost U.S. competitiveness against China. The administration has been reviewing its approach to China. When are we going to hear more about the findings and the strategy there?
I would say that this is an ongoing process more than a process with a, you know, particular big announcement or deadline. But we're doing it now. You know, for example, what we're talking about, semiconductors, that's core to our strategy as it relates to China. We need to invest in America. The president's jobs plan is all about competing with China, improve our education system, improve our infrastructure, invest in manufacturing. You know, the way to compete with China is to run faster, to invest in America. And then in terms of defense, we haven't slowed down. You know, in my department, we've continued to add Chinese companies to the entities list. We've subpoenaed a number of Chinese companies to extract information from them. And we're going to do what we need to do to protect American industry.
Meantime, the Colonial Pipeline hack has raised awareness about the vulnerability of our infrastructure to cyber attacks. What do you see as the biggest risks to businesses here, and what does your budget do to address this?
Yeah, unfortunately, this is a large and growing risk to U.S. businesses, and I think Colonial was a wake-up call to all American businesses that they need to do more. And I think particularly smaller businesses for whom it is difficult need to invest more. We are investing heavily at the Commerce Department in shoring up our own cybersecurity, as well as researching cyber and cyber technology so that we could continue to make ourselves more secure.
Now, the president also today emphasized how the administration is working to protect small businesses from anti-competitive forces. The U.S. obviously has expressed concerns about big U.S. tech companies and their power. Europe also has expressed those concerns. Will big tech regulation be on the agenda for the G7?
You know, that is a better question for the Treasury Secretary or others. I would say, for my part, we are heavily engaged with the EU in discussions around privacy protection of data, tech regulation, and our collaboration and partnership with Europe is important. It's important for companies on both sides of the Atlantic. And so we are working, I am in constant contact with tech companies in America, to make big and small, to make sure that their interests are represented, but also with our counterparts in Europe to make sure, you know, we're allies. We have the same values. We believe in privacy. We believe in openness. And so we are working hard with the Europeans to come to a common set of values so that we can continue to operate across the Atlantic.